And now,
ladies and gentlemen,
please fasten your seatbelts.
Welcome to PreneurCast.
Yeah, business cards being swapped, beers being drunk.
Can I say a nasty word? Can I say procrastination?
With Pete Williams and Dom Goucher.
How well did that go down?
We can talk about that entire thing in a very another rant and soapbox episode if we want to.
Visit us online at PreneurMarketing.com.
Hey, buddy. Good to hear from you again this week.
Big fella, how you doing?
I'm pretty good, pretty good. Busy week
Very
for
nice. Yeah, it's always a bit crazy in my world, but it's been in control, let's say. It's been in control.
Awesome. That's the way we like it.
Absolutely. Little shenanigans is good every now and again, but...
Well, yes. So I hear. You know I live vicariously through your exploits, obviously, so...
Yeah, that's fair enough. I'm going to be a married man next year, mate, so it's going to be very tame. But that's all right. We went and saw wedding photographers tonight, so it's on my mind at the moment. So.
Oh, wedding photographers.
They're expensive.
Don't, mate, don't. Crazy. That's that whole topic, the whole wedding photography thing. Massive, crazy business. Dude,
it's insane. Anyway.
Yep. Okay, nice segue. I'm gonna segue away from the wedding thing. It's just making my skin crawl. All right, I'm gonna whip out my mind map for the show. Last week's show, we started talking about books.
We did.
I talked about the stack of books I've got on my desk, and I kind of gave you a heads up on a book that was relevant to what we were talking about. But it did raise a topic that I mean, and I've said this before in previous podcasts. You are a bit of a monster consumer of content. But what I like to find out what people are reading. I like to talk to the people around me and just see what's going on, because everybody has different influences and comes across different things, and I think it's great to kind of pick up on new stuff. So I thought this week we could we could talk about the books that have influenced you, what you're reading right now, what's on your desk, as it were.
Sure.
And if there's any time left, maybe I'll see if I can surprise you with a few of mine.
Oh, bring it on. Sounds like a good challenge.
Great.
All right. So, where shall we start? Because I guess a discussion about books can be very deep.
We've covered a couple in the past. In the past couple of podcasts, we've talked about. I've brought up things like the E-Myth.
Mm-hmm.
And a little aside last week to the 4-hour work week, and one of the core threads through this podcast is business and business efficiency, and entrepreneurism, obviously, given the title. So maybe we could focus just around those areas, just about efficiency, about businesses, and entrepreneurism. Things along the lines of the E-Myth and the 4-hour work week.
So not Winnie the Pooh or anything like that?
You've only got that because it's free on the iPad.
Do you know, actually, one of my favourite books is actually a book called The Tao of Pooh and the Tea of Piglet. It's I guess you call it a bit of a philosophy type book.
Yeah, I've actually read that.
Very cool. Yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So not really directly on topic. So look, I guess I can just start playing through some of the books I've been reading and have read over the years. Is that sort of where we shall take this?
Yeah, I think in the last podcast when I talked about the E-Myth, to me it's rather than just go, and I read this book and it was good. I'd be very interested in what you got from it.
Okay.
Because I think different people get different things from these books. It's like, I mean, the one of the big threads that we talk about, but we never really delve into, and we will do at one point, is the whole GTD thing. And David Allen is Getting Things Done books.
Oh, well, that's just a great book.
It is a fabulous book, but you can take a lot of different things from that book.
Yes, absolutely.
There's the overall thing, or there's like some ninja tips here and there that really work, or whatever. So I'm interested personally, and I think most people listening would be interested in not just like the book, but what you got from it. If it made a difference, if it changed the way you did something. I think that's a big thing. Yeah.
I think we may as well start with getting things done. We can kind of have a whole episode about GTD and the philosophies there because it warrants a full show. But I guess the biggest takeaway I got from getting things done was it's a to-do list should be about action items, not outcomes. So when you're writing a to-do list for yourself or a staff member or whatever it might be, it shouldn't be we want to do this or we want this sort of outcome. The do is I'm going to say a verb, I could be completely wrong, of action. So what are the actual steps and physical actions I need to do? So that's sort of the biggest thing that I kind of got away from that when I'm actually doing something and writing down a plan. It's got to be what are the actual actionable physical things I am going to actually do to actually get the result I need. So that was kind of a big thing that kind of really resonated with me from that book.
Cool. Now, so that we just don't dig too far in, but there is a kind of counterpoint on that one, because I'm also a big fan of the David Allen stuff. Were you already... there's something in there that made the difference to me, as well as the action part, which was... And I'd be interested to know if you were already doing this, because I have a feeling you might have. One of the things that it did for me was the idea that if you have a trusted place to take a note of your projects, tasks, to-dos, all those different labels that he gives things, doesn't matter what it is, something you need to remember. If you have a trusted place that you can put it, and you put that thing there, it takes pressure off you. Because a lot of people run around with these things in their head, saying, oh, I need to do that, I need to do that, I need to do that. And even though you're not consciously thinking of it, it's taking energy. But you strike me as somebody who kind of already had that sorted before you came across the whole GTD thing, but did you?
I'd say it's a bit of an illusion, mate. I think I had places, but it wasn't just one place, which I think is almost just as counterproductive as not having a place at all.
Absolutely. I mean, he says as many as you need, but no more. Don't make it easy to capture, but don't.
Yeah. See, I had like a little notebook that I occasionally carry around in my pocket. I had a notebook in the car. I had the iPhone with the notebook on there. I had like a bit of text files and stuff on the laptop. So it wasn't really one definitive inbox. Whereas a good thing with OmniFocus, which is a software program that I use, it has platforms on the iPhone, the iPad, and the Mac. So it's actually there wherever I am, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, and before we really make a whole show about GTD, just like by accident, we'll come back to all that stuff. I think it's great. I mean, that book is a massive, massive book. The concept of GTD is huge, and I think everybody does get something individual from it. Is there anything else? Any other books, kind of workflowy, organisational, optimising, productivity things? I guess
there's probably a couple other ones that I can think of that kind of fit in that sort of whole productivity space. Is Eat That Frog by Brian Tracey, which was, I guess, it was almost to a lot of people getting things done before getting things done came about. In that it was, I've heard a lot of people refer to Eat That Frog, and then since David Allen's books have come out, everyone sort of starts referencing that. But Eat That Frog is really cool. It's just basically 21 little productivity tricks of how to actually get through stuff. And unlike getting things done, I can't think of one particular thing that I took away from that book. I just know, and this is probably going to be a bit of a resonating thing throughout the episode, is that I'll mention books that I know I really loved, and trying to isolate now the one thing out of them might be a little bit hard because I kind of have just blended into my workflows and over time. So I'll try and be as specific as I can. But Eat That Frog, I remember being a really cool book about just time management. And it's more about time management because I think that was the buzz term before productivity became the buzzword. But essentially it's all the same thing.
Yeah, sure. I mean, at the end of the day, there may be one thing that you got. I mean, sometimes one thing out of a book or a conversation or a lecture or whatever resonates with me, and sometimes it's just the whole book and the ethos of it.
Oh, absolutely.
And and sometimes it's just enough to say, well, this book is about productivity and time management. Because at the end of the day, I mean, I'll give you a classic example, and here's some marketing for somebody if they're paying attention. And yeah, I know they know what they're doing, but the E-Myth. For the longest time, I didn't read the E-Myth. Okay, do you know why?
Because you thought you already knew it?
No, because all I heard was the title, The E-Myth. And anything preceded by E in our world is electronic, all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, why do I just get the feeling this book's going to be about, the myth of online technologies? I never saw it in a bookstore to pick it up. I never really it passed me by in conversation. I'd say, yeah, I'll get around to it. And then one day somebody actually said, really, you should read this. And it was somebody who I respect. And I went on Amazon and looked it up and looked at the cover, and it's like, oh, it's the entrepreneurial myth. Oh. Now, I realise that's a major fail on my part, but...
Don't judge a book by its cover.
Well, in this case, I should have judged a book by its cover by actually having a look, instead of just, listening to the title and making that mistake. But in this day and age, prefixing something by an E or an I, is a big label. It's a big thing. It means it has a preconceived idea.
Absolutely.
And so I just didn't read it. So I think it's good, even if we just go down this list to go, this book's about this.
Yeah.
I think we'll be helping people, especially really kind of people with attention problems like me. So Eat That Frog. I mean, I've you've mentioned that before, but I've never come across it other than you mentioning it. So that's a good one too.
It's a really cool book. Nice. It's not a hard read. It's quite an easy read. And I definitely say, as much as I love audio books and I devour most of my content in audio, read the book version of Eat That Frog. I think Brian Tracey's fantastic. He endorsed my first book, so I thank him very much for that. But as I think a lot of people will say, is I have a lot of trouble listening to him in audio format because he's very doesn't have a lot of tonality to his voice, so it's just very monotone, and it can kind of I won't say grate on you, but I can't think of a better term than that. So I think the written book of Brian Tracey is probably better than some of his audio programs.
Okay, good tip.
Content's awesome, but it's just, I think, to actually feel engaged with it is much better to read. Yeah, other productivity books, I guess you put in there the Pomodoro Technique, which, I think can be summed up entirely in about 5 minutes, but the book itself is pretty cool. It just talks about the Pomodoro Technique, which is fundamentally just focusing on things to the distraction of all else for a short period of time is basically what the whole premise is. Just sort of set yourself a time period to say, I'm going to work on this for X amount of time and do nothing else. And that's, I guess, the premise of that book. And it's really interesting to see yourself discipline yourself to build that discipline of saying, I'm just going to do one thing and one thing only for a certain amount of time. And whether that's be writing or going for a run or whatever it might be, I think that's a big discipline we need to have in this world of so many distractions. And that was a really cool book just to sort of sink that in. Okay,
again, new one to me. I didn't know there was a book about that. I just read all the online stuff and I was happy with it. I believe
you can get it. I think you can download the PDF version for free, or you can buy the book if you want to. So, that's probably one of the other sort of really good productivity books. The 80-20 Principle by Richard Koch, which is sort of, again, a lot of people know what the 80-20 Principle is. And Richard, funnily enough, again, who endorsed my first book, also has written a fantastic book about how to actually apply that to your life and things like that, which is really cool.
Okay, we'll come back to that very offhand way that you mentioned that a couple of major authors have endorsed your books. Maybe we'll do another show on that, because I think there's something in that.
Okay, we can talk that.
Any others around the productivity stuff? Or
probably all
business?
I can think. That's probably there's plenty of books around business and stuff. In terms of, I guess, productivity, that's probably where that sort of they're the big ones for me. I think there's probably plenty of others that I've read and devoured over time, but they're probably the big ones that have really sort of stuck with me in my mind of their made a difference.
Cool. Here's a question for you: how do you? Because one of the books I brought up last week was Hare, Brain, Tortoise, Mind.
Yes.
And I'm a bit of a learner about learning and about not so much productivity, but about optimum performance.
Yep.
Whether it's physical or mental. Have you got any interest in that, or have you got any books along those lines?
I guess it sort of depends how you categorise it. I think, how to win friends and influence people could kind of fit in that realm, I guess, of personal development. Are we sort of talking personal development a bit, or a bit more niche is your question?
I guess personal development's a good generic. I mean, I'm quite specific about the kind of as I say, optimum performance rather than.
Yeah. Top of my head, optimal performance.
Well, like, for example, I mean, you might have something related to your running. I know you're big into your, marathon, Ironman stuff.
Yeah.
And is there any things, because I think doing a bit of physical exercise is good for anybody. So
yeah, cool. I think there's some good running books that I enjoy listening to while I'm running, which that sort of possibly fits into it. One book I really enjoyed was What I Talk About When I Talk About Running, and it's just written by a fiction author, and I think this is his first non-fiction book, and it's sort of basically an autobiography of this Japanese or Chinese, I'm pretty sure it's Japanese, and he writes most of his books in Japanese that gets translated to English, and then he wrote a book again in Japanese which got translated to English, and it's just talking about his life story and how he was able to get through the battle of writing and shipping books through running by actually getting out and running and sort of giving that freedom and stuff like that. And that was really, really cool. I found that really interesting, and I listened to that entire book on audio format whilst running myself. So it was really cool, sort of training companionship while I was training for the marathon last year. So that was really cool. Other books, I think, you can almost class Neil Strauss's book The Game in that sort of, personal space, because when you look at it, again, judging the book by the cover, the subtitle is, the penetrating the world of pickup artists, and you can sort of think that it's all about just pickup artists, but fundamentally the book is about social science and interaction and how to actually interact with someone of the opposite sex or of the same sex, if you want to sort of apply the lessons to networking and just, meeting people and being engaging in conversation. And I think all the principles that he talks about can absolutely apply in your life, just in becoming an engaging person and someone of interest, I guess is probably a good word to use there.
That's an excellent tip, and I guess really that's what I was hoping to get out of this is that you've taken something, you've read it, and you've managed to just make it a bit more applicable, just rather than just face value stuff.
Yeah, I think the game is awesome for that. You can read it for entertainment and sort of see how this nerdy white guy became, a legendary pickup artist. And Neil's awesome. He's fantastic, and he's such an engaging writer as well. But the lessons if you read it from the context of how can I actually apply the stuff he's teaching in areas outside of the bar, you'll really amaze yourself of how it can be applied there, because it's really, really cool stuff. And I think everyone should read it, male or female, and you can put the sexual connotations aside a little bit and just take the social science lessons out of it, and it's really, really cool.
Excellent. Yeah, because I years ago the whole the whole body language and all that stuff was very popular with people, and there's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah,
it doesn't
absolutely.
matter what you're in, what you're trying to do, but the whole topic of influence, that's a big thing.
The book itself, Influence by Robert Cialdini, is an absolute must read.
Oh, you picked up on that subtle segue, did you?
Yeah. Well, I think it's an awesome book in itself, and I think that it can't be taken any other way than it is, which is just brilliant with the influence factors that influence any society. And if you can apply that to your conversations with your spouse, your kids, your boss, in every bit of marketing you do, whether it's a sales letter or a full-on marketing campaign, you want to try and incorporate as many of those influence factors or triggers as you can.
Absolutely. I mean, that was one of the... I think that was one of the most powerful books I've read in the last few years in terms of just being slapped in the face by, the depth to which this guy did his research and proof and examples and also then making you look at what you see on a day-to-day basis and go, wow, look, I can see that person doing that. And some more obvious than others, obviously.
Absolutely. I remember I read that book when I was 17 and very, very lucky. Got recommended that book at a very young age, and it's been a staple of everything I do since.
Wow.
Which is really cool. On the topic of influence, if you want more of a practical book, because influence is very theoretical and it sort of talks about the concepts and gives some examples and stuff, but there's two awesome books that sort of take that in a more applicable manner, and one is Yes which is also written by Robert Cialdini and a couple of other authors, and it's more practical examples, 50 ways, I think it is, to actually apply the influence factors in various things, which is really cool.
I've read that one. Yeah, that is very good, actually.
And I was going to say Triggers by Joe Sugarman. Now, Joe Sugarman is a direct response marketer, and he was the guy behind the Blue Blockers sunglasses, which was a huge thing in the late 80s and early 90s. Sold millions and millions and millions of sunglasses through TV infomercials. And Triggers is basically a book, 30 chapters, and it's just each chapter is an example of one influence trigger and how he applied it in a particular marketing campaign. So it's basically full of case studies that are easily transferable to your own business, which is really cool. Really, really cool book.
Cool. So, I mean, the whole influence thing, I think, is a massive topic. Certainly, you know, in the internet marketing space, but also just in general business. You know,
absolutely.
The whole interaction with people thing is critical, no matter what you do.
Yeah,
but I suppose in personal life too, I guess. Any more kind of influential business marketing?
I can sit here for hours, mate. A really cool book, I think, that comes into that again. A lot of people probably would not have heard of, but it sort of fits that becoming an entrepreneur and standing for something. It kind of fits in that whole influence factor to a certain extent as well. Is a book called "How to Be That Guy" by a friend of mine called Scott Ginsberg. Now, he's written about 7 or 8 books now, and he's in his early 30s, and he has worn a name tag, "Hi, my name is Scott," on his chest every single day for, I think it is going to be up to about 7 years now. No matter where he goes, he has a label on, "Hi, my name is Scott." And I think you can visit him at hi-my-name-is-scott.com or my-name-is-scott.com. And it's gone to the extent now he's actually got a tattoo on his chest of a name tag saying, "Hi, my name is Scott." Wow. Really, really cool book. And he writes and talks and gives presentations about how to be approachable, how to stand out, how to be engaging. And one of his books, which I think is by far one of his best, I haven't read his most recent ones, but was "How to Be That Guy." With that being the key word in that sentence. And it really talks about how to sort of actually become a person of influence, of respect, of notoriety, in all the good ways that can happen. And it's a really cool book, really simple book, really easy to read. He writes really small, easy to read books that are really engaging and very applicable. And I think that's a great read as well that someone probably wouldn't have heard a lot about.
Cool. Good. That's really
sold a lot of them, but yes, that's a good one. I guess you can always sort of talk about Stephen Pressfield's Do the Work and the War of Art, and Annie Lamont's Bird by Bird, and all that sort of stuff about shipping, which is really cool. And I don't think we should rehash that because hopefully people who are listening to this have read Do the Work by Stephen Pressfield and his first one, the War of Art, and again, if you're sort of into that sort of shipping and writing kind of space, Bird by Bird. From Annie Lamott is a great book around that. But I guess also in terms of shipping, though, it's probably worth talking about Guy Kawasaki, who has written a number of books. One that I think is by far his best, called Rules for Revolutionaries. And that book is probably 13 years old now. And it's the first one of his I read, and I read that back in, I reckon it would have been about 2001, maybe 2001. After a friend of mine who was in the insurance game, a lot older than I was, but it was in the insurance game, went to the $1 Million Round Table. It was, I think it still is actually, like a networking group, an international networking group of insurance salesmen, I think it is. And it's called the $1 Million Round Table. And I think you have to write $1 million worth of insurance in 12 months to get in this group or something like that. I don't know the ins and outs of it. But he went across to the US from Australia about 10 years ago and heard Guy Kawasaki speak. He was the keynote speaker at the time, and bought a recording of the presentation back on cassette. This is how old it was, on cassette. And it ended up in my hands after going through a few people. And it is one of the best presentations I think I have ever heard on just doing something revolutionary. He was part of the Apple team when Apple had its first huge spike, and And it's a really cool read. And I guess The Art of the Start, which is a more recent book of Guy's, is fundamentally a rehash of Rules for Revolutionaries. He kind of just reworded some of it, but the foundation's still the same. And I think Rules for Revolutionaries is a much better read. And it's actually the very first person I heard talking about shipping. And I'm going to mess this joke up, I know I am. But in the presentation, one of the points he talks about is how, the ice farmers didn't revolutionise their industry enough and got lost out to the fridge manufacturers and things like that, and kind of talking about, when's it time to sort of make sure you create a new revolution and how to actually push through and make it happen. And one of the things he talks about is, how do you know when you're ready to ship? How do you know when the product is good enough to ship? Because so many people, and this is, again, just in a lot of conversation these days, it's all about shipping, but Guy spoke about this 10 years ago. And his answer was, you have to ship your product when what your current product is like crinkled paper to leaves on the ground. When, your product is the equivalent of just, some rough toilet paper to leaves on the ground. What's better? Very rough toilet paper is much, much better than leaves on the ground. And he talks about that's when you want to ship. S-H-I-P, ship. When your product is like the very first incarnation of toilet paper. And he makes a much better joke of that. So if you can find a copy of the audio, by all means listen to it, because you'll actually enjoy that and laugh at that really bad attempt of rehashing a joke. But that is really, really cool. Rules for Revolutionaries and The Art of the Start. He's got a new book out called Engagement. Haven't read it yet, but I think that's getting a lot of conversation happening around that book at the moment. But I don't know sort of personally what the book's like. But that's a really cool book to read. And actually, speaking of jokes, another cool book to read is a book called Born Standing Up. And it's Steve Martin's autobiography, who is the famous comedian, stand-up comedian. And it's an awesome, awesome book. And it's available in audio as well, where he reads it. And it goes through his early career. So before the movies and all that sort of stuff, before he became famous, and it's talking about how he started out as a young kid wanting to do magic and becoming a stand-up comedian and living out of the back of his car, and the heartache and the work and the repetition and just the effort he had to put in to refine his craft of being a stand-up comedian, because he was at the time, the number one comedian in the world, bar none. He was it, and everyone basically thought, you were just born you were born standing up. You were born as a comic, and the book basically talks about how much work and blood, sweat, and tears he had to put in to refine his craft over many, many years before he became the legendary comedian that everyone knows him for. So it's a really good motivational book, and sort of shows you that no one is just born standing up in any field. You have to actually work hard to do it, and I think that's an awesome book.
Excellent. That's a really good tip. I mean, that's in an entire book. That's kind of we talked about Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers in a previous episode, and I think that's a really good example. Of the cool thing that I took away from Outliers, which is that nobody's born standing up. Nobody's born as good as they appear to be today. They worked at it to get there. Yeah. Some people were slightly more privileged than others, which is the other thing that's in Outliers that people forget to mention.
Yes. I think too, yeah. I was going to say, in terms of, I know I'm kind of just going off on random topics and linking books together, but if you want a fun read, an enjoyable read as well, a great book by Tucker Max called I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell. Now, it's not for the faint-hearted. If you think The Game by Neil Strauss is going to be a bit too risque for you, please stay away from Tucker Max. He is the crudest, I won't use the word that he uses to describe himself, but one of the crudest writers you can ever imagine. But it's a really engaging book about, I guess, social interaction. It's a bit autobiographical in that it's just a whole bunch of little mini stories that was originally on his blog, tuckermax.com, that he just turned into a book. And it's just really interesting to sort of see the adventures and craziness this guy got up to and how blatantly rude he is and how he gets away with it all. But it's really cool to sort of see what engaging writing is like. If you're a writer, it's really cool just to see how interaction works. If you're sort of that social dynamics kind of interest, and he knows how to sell himself. And what he is, you don't want to take him home to your grandma by any means, but he's, found a niche for himself and has just done a very, very good job of marketing himself, which is really cool.
Cool.
So that was a really cool book. What else can I think of?
Well, I mean, the thing is, the great thing about this is that so far, we've covered a couple of authors that everybody will have heard of, or should have if they're listening to this, as you say, but also a couple of really out there kind of left field things that because you do consume and you have a great range of influences, you've gone and got this interesting stuff. One person you haven't talked about at all is Seth Godin, who is the golden child of whatever, really, I guess. pick a topic. Look, and Seth Godin's written a book about it.
Oh, I think Seth is awesome. Don't get me wrong. I think he is awesome. Yeah. However, I think his books could be a lot more petite. Let's put it like Tribes, amazing book. Mm-hmm. The Dip, amazing book. Poke the Box, I think, is a great one because he's actually quite short. I think a lot of his stuff can be said in a lot less words than he does. That's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just my opinion. But I think he's very good at articulating a point, and he does a lot of research, or he has such a big following now that he gets a lot of case studies and examples sent to him because people sort of know what he's talking about, and he sort of does random little things on his blog, and then people email him heaps of examples and stories that he can build on and put his books together. So I think he's a very, very good publisher of information.
Yeah, I mean, slight digression, but he's picked up this whole domino project idea.
Very cool.
Which has been very cool so far. Yeah, I have to say, I'm going to agree with you with Seth Godin. The first thing of his I really came across was Tribes.
Yeah.
And that really resonated with me. I really, and that was pretty well paced, pretty reasonable volume. But then I went on to read Lynchpin.
Yes.
And I kind of thought, okay,
awesome
book, but I kind of thought, yeah, got your point. Chapter 1. Oh, look, chapter 2. Yeah, no, really, I got your point. No, really got your point. Got your point. Thanks. Got your point.
One thing about Seth that a lot of people don't know is he actually co-authored the Guerrilla Marketing Handbook.
I knew that.
With John...
Jay Levinson.
Jay Levinson, thank you very much.
It's on my bookshelf.
Yep. That's an awesome reference guide, an amazing reference guide for direct response marketing. Yeah,
I was hoping you would talk about that one. That is a really hard book to find.
Yes. There's Guerrilla Marketing, which is the book, and then there's the Guerrilla Marketing Handbook, which is just a whole bunch of case studies and examples and swipe file.
Yep.
Which is a very, very cool book to have.
Yeah, I remember back in the days when Amazon wasn't that great, and it was just kind of finding its feet. And when the rare book sellers online weren't really around either, somebody mentioned the Guerrilla Marketing Handbook to me, and I just was going spare trying to find that thing.
Yeah, I think it's probably an eBay thing these days.
Yeah, the irony was when I met my partner, she had a copy.
Oh, wow.
That was awesome.
Very cool. Very, very cool.
Very cool.
Just make sure you get that in the divorce papers.
Yeah, well, it's on my bookshelf at the moment.
Perfect, there you go.
So,
possession is 6/10 of the law, isn't it? Something like that.
Yeah, although she very often does all the packing, so I could leave it.
Okay.
We are getting pretty close to time on this one.
Can I reel off some other must-reads, or should we do another episode in the future?
No, let's reel them off. I'll fire up the old mind map and I'll start taking notes.
All right, some other books. I'm just sort of going through the bookshelf and some stuff like that. I think one of the best investing books that I really enjoyed was John Burley. He's got a book called Money Secrets of the Rich, and I think it's a really good book. It kind of just breaks down different rules. Obviously, there's some general ones. Take 10% of your income, put it to savings, and all that sort of stuff, which is just, richest man in Babylon, and very time-tested, true investment principles. But there's a whole lot of other stuff in there about how to actually become a solid investor and have some money. And he has this 7 levels of investors, and it sort of takes you through how to actually start at the start of being at the bottom of the level and what principles you need to put in place to get there. And then once you've got those principles in place, you become a second level investor, and you can kind of go through that. And it's a really, really cool book that probably not a lot of people have actually heard about, because he was very much a seminar speaker and selling some very high-end coaching programs. But he, about 2/3 of the way through his speaking career, I guess you'd call it, he produced this book, and I think it's a fantastic book. And I think he does a lot of infomercials late at night in the US now and stuff like that. So take that with a grain of salt, but I really do believe the book itself is a fantastic book. Born to Run, in terms of going back to the running stuff, I think that's a great book. That's just an engaging book about running and stuff like that. I don't think it really has any effect on anything else, except for don't always believe what you read. Go and do some research and find out what's best for you. Because that's sort of a bit of an underlying premise of the book, and I'll leave it at that for people who want to go on and find out more about that book. Another book that I really love is a book called Dare to Fail by a guy called Billy Lim, and he's an author out of Singapore, I think it is, somewhere in sort of Southeast Asia or Indonesia. And it's a book that I believe is self-published, but I read this probably 5-6 years ago. It got recommended to me by an advisor that I was working with at the time, and it's a really cool book. It just sort of talks about why you want to fail in life, and gives a whole bunch of really cool case studies. Very, very easy to read. I think it's available on Amazon. Very, very cool book, Dare to Fail. I guess I couldn't go on without talking about The 1 Minute Millionaire, which is the book by Mark Victor Hansen and Robert Allen. It's an awesome read about sort of becoming entrepreneurial. There's actually 2 books in one. One of it's a bit of a fiction story about I think it's a woman who is going to have her kids taken away from her in a divorce, I think it is, and then how she sort of finds some mentors and becomes an entrepreneur to make enough money to be able to keep the kids. And then the other half of the book is a bit of an action guide or a non-fiction book walking you through that. And the way they've actually set the book is really cool, is that on the left-hand pages is the fiction book, and on the right-hand pages is the non-fiction book. So it's a kind of a cool way to sort of roll it out, which I thought was really engaging. And it's actually that book that I got the whole idea for the whole MCG project that I did a few years ago, which is sort of, I guess, a big stepping stone for me with my various projects and things like that. So I have to credit that book for that, because I really just got the idea of how Paul Hartunian sold pieces of the Brooklyn Bridge in New York, and how I just used that idea and replicated that here in Australia. So I think I have to give a lot to that book. The Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz is a really, really cool book. The Magic of Thinking Big. It just talks about why you want to be a positive thinker. It's a very old book. I think it's from the 60s or something like that. But it's a really cool book. Don't get the audio version. The audio version is not that great. It's sort of a hybrid book / case study / testimonial. So actually read the book, The Magic of Thinking Big. The Wolf of Wall Street, just a really engaging read about Jordan Belfort. If we talk about debauchery that is Tucker Max, we've got to at least include Jordan and The Wolf of Wall Street in that category. The Creative Habit, Twyla Tharp is awesome if you're someone who's creating stuff. 22 Immutable Laws of Branding, Jack Trout, John Rees, I think it is. I could be getting that slightly wrong. Just awesome book for marketing, a whole bunch of principles for marketing and things like that. Dan Kennedy's, Ultimate Sales Letters. A lot of Dan Kennedy's books are awesome. You can go and invest, $2,000-$3,000 in one of his courses, or you can spend $20 and buy one of his books, which I recommend you have every one of his books on your bookshelf. Richard Branson's autobiography was a really cool read. Losing My Virginity. Rich Dad Poor Dad by Kawasaki, again, an awesome investing book.
Should we do just another show on this? Because this is amazing.
I can see. I'm going through the bookshelf, mate. That's all. I'm just looking at the Jay Abrahams. Getting everything you can out of what you got is a really cool just book about business and marketing and making sure you are really using your resources to the most efficient way. I know I'm talking away from the microphone now, but it's because I'm looking at a different part of the bookshelf. And probably. We'll leave on this book. Oh, the Places You Shall Go by Dr. Seuss. Very, very cool read.
And you're absolutely serious about that.
I am.
I know.
I'll let a bit of a secret out. It may be read as a reading at our wedding. And I'm deadly serious about that too.
That's fantastic.
David Jennings is on the agenda to try and get that tongue twister out in front of a lot of people. So,
that has to be recorded.
We'll try and do that.
Davy Jennings reading Dr. Seuss. That's got to be worth money.
Yeah. So yeah, there you go. I know I kind of went a bit nuts at the end there, but I thought I may as well get them all off the chest, because I think, who knows when we do another book episode. We should probably do one every couple of months because of the amount of content. I'm kind of go through some of the more recent books that I've read and what they've done, because I guess that list and my bookshelf list is pretty much the stuff that I have as staples, I guess you'd call them. And there's plenty of other books that I've read recently that are worth a read and a consume. We can kind of go through them at some stage as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is it. I mean, this was a kind of an overview kick-off thing, but yeah, we should do this regularly, because there are the books that have influenced you, that have made a big difference, and that, I mean, I can completely believe that you reading a copy of Influence when you were 17 made a major difference to what you did. Similarly, the 1 Minute Millionaire. You mentioned that before about the MCG project. And in the same way, and it's a little bit, here we go, it's smoke blowing time. In the same way that Steve Martin in his book writes about how he got where he got to, but there's an awful lot of work that went into it, and very few people know that. I mean, depending on your awareness of American culture, for example, if you don't live in America and haven't been exposed to the American culture very much, you might have not come across Steve Martin until maybe he was in one of his more famous films.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gone, yeah, wow, what a really funny guy. Born, and as you say, born standing up. But you weren't born successful any more than he was born standing up. And one of the things that I'm interested in about people is what did it, yeah. What steps, what big steps happened, what big things happened, and we've talked about you in the past and the MCG project, which is I think the thing that really launched you. But I'm sure there were a few things before that you had a go at, and maybe even you failed. And there's a topic for another call, hey?
Oh, I'd love to talk about that. That'll be a couple of episodes though, mate. I can absolutely talk about some of the stupid things I've done and the opportunities that I've wasted and things like that. We should absolutely have a chat about that, just to, I guess, put everything in context a little bit,
Cool. Well, we are, again, ridiculously over time, but I think it was worth it. That was an excellent insight into the bookshelves of Pete Williams. And a little bit more about what you got from them as well. I think that's the important thing. This is on my bookshelf is all well and good, but why is far more important and far more valuable to people.
Yeah, I think I'd love to hear other people's experiences too, not only with the books that sort of I mentioned, but even some other books that really influence anybody else. So, head over to the blog, leave some comments, Twitter, Facebook. There's plenty of ways you can kind of interact with Dom and myself. And I'd be really keen to hear what other people got from a book, because, I've read books and I've read them a couple of times in certain instances, and it'd be really cool to see what other people took away from a book. And maybe when I go back and reread it again, I can look at it with that frame in mind and hopefully get something else out from the book in a different context. It'd be really cool. And I think it'd be an awesome discussion point.
I completely agree. Let's. I mean, so far we haven't done this. In the shows we haven't talked about this. But yeah, we absolutely want your feedback. The very first show we talked about this. We said, Pete and I started this because, I think Pete is an interesting subject. An interesting guy all round. He's got some great experiences and he's very successful at what he does. But it's not just me asking the questions. We want questions from the listeners, from people that are involved in the show. We want to know what you want to hear about, because the show isn't just for us. We're making it because hopefully people are listening to it and enjoying it and getting something from it. So if we can do something, make a show about, well, whatever. So yeah, head over to the blog, hit us up on Twitter, all those different ways. Pete's totally available. Believe it or not. He's a real guy with a real email address that he does really answer. And give us some feedback. That'll be fantastic. All right, mate, I'm going to wrap it up because, as I say, we are well over time. And next week, well, I'll be hearing from you from the poolside in Burley. Absolutely. The conversation might be a little bit interesting. I might have had too many pina coladas, but we'll see how we go. Yeah, we may have to shift the time of the slot so that it's maybe late at night for me and early in the morning for you. Otherwise, it could get very interesting. Well, I'll speak to you from the tropics. Excellent, mate. See you next week. Ciao.
You've been enjoying another fine episode of PreneurCast with Pete Williams and Dom Goucher. Make sure to hang out with the boys online at www.PreneurMarketing.com or drop them a line via PreneurCast@PreneurGroup.com.